off so hard on teams.
Oh, the Jaguars
didn't
make me so
fire their
angry.
coaches. We haven't talked about the ones who actually did. The Jags did fire their head coach. They moved on from Doug Peterson, and there's elements of that job that I think are attractive. Mainly Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas. Like there are players there, and there's a decent draft pick, and there's some cap, and there's stuff there that you think might attract somebody.
A good up-and-coming or veteran head coach, not ageist at all, can come in and win 7 to 9 games next year. And if you get lucky, you could win 10 games the next year, but they have to fix Trevor Lawrence. That might be hard to do.
So 4 of the jobs available. 3 of them we knew out in season. The Chicago Bears, the New Orleans Saints, the New York Jets all fired their coaches in season. You add the New England Patriots to that. What did you make of them moving on from Gerard Mayo, going one and done? It's become such a much more of a trend in the NFL. 10 years ago, a one-and-done coach was like a jaw-dropping thing to happen.
Tom Sula, right? There was like, oh my gosh, how could they do this? It's so crazy. Now it's commonplace. Well, I covered back-to-back.
I think there's been 6 in the last 4 years.
Well, one of my claims to fame is that I covered back-to-back one-and-done head coaches with Houston Texans. I covered who even remembers David Culley? Covered David Culley and Lovie Smith. I don't have hours to cover that era, but I've covered that stuff before. And overall, it is brutal. And in the end, you're just trying to find the right head coach. You're rebuilding. Your organization is a mess. Then miraculously, somebody will come and fix you. And that happened with the Houston Texans. But that's usually why you do the one and done. For me, I have no problem with it. I've seen a lot of this on social media and out there. I never believed in Jared Mayo as a head coach. And I don't believe in opening press conferences. Like, you can't win an opening press conference, and usually you end up losing in the long run if you do. But Jared Mayo coming out and saying, we're going to burn a lot of cash in free agency, Will, and then having to come out and say, well, I misspoke. I didn't really mean that. I'm sorry. I'm very cutthroat and ruthless with this because I know how cutthroat and ruthless the NFL is. I covered it for a long time in the trenches. If you say that means you don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Okay? That means you don't know what you're talking about, and you're not qualified to be the head coach. You might have been a good linebacker. You might be a good guy. You might mean a lot to the Patriots, and on and on. But you have to be smart. You have to be good enough to do the job on a billion levels. Jared Mayo was not cut up for that job. They had to get rid of him. It's
funny because the 2 worst opening press conferences from head coaches in the last decade, I would say, or the worst received, let's put it that way, Nick Sirianni and Dan Campbell's, where everyone laughed at him for the bite the kneecap thing, right? They're the 1 and 2 seed in the NFC now. Yeah. Those guys are actually good coaches.
Opening press conferences are so overrated, yeah.
But they didn't come out and make promises. Yep. That's the point. They talked about culture. They talked about what they wanted the team to be. I look at these openings, right? The Jets have no idea what they're going to do at quarterback. They still got Aaron Rodgers in the building. What a kind of...
And Aaron Rodgers doesn't know what he's going to do with his future.
The New Orleans Saints, finally, cap hell has come back to bite them. Yeah. And they should move on from Mickey Loomis, but they're not going to move on from Mickey Loomis, who has been running that thing, the puppet of every string, in both that building and with the Pelicans as well, for the last 20 or 30
he's
years.
Like this. He's the sports godfather of New Orleans.
He has driven that organization into the ground, and they're a 5-year project. If someone comes in and takes that over, you're not aiming for next season or the season after. You're looking down to 2029.
For right? New Orleans, you know what they should hire? They should hire like the next great young college coach, because you're really exactly right. You come in and you say, hey, we're going to lose up front. You give me the keys. Trust me. I have the master. You have to have a book. You have to have like a 500-page Tolstoy novel, and this is the plan, because it's going to take time in New Orleans.
You're going and knocking on some doors in Oregon. You're going and knocking on some doors. Like, there's a few teams who are in those college playoffs who might have some head coaches potentially interested. But what I want to talk about is the Patriots versus the Bears. Because there was this idea with these opening head coaching vacancies that because the Bears had Caleb, because they have got some good pieces on defense with the injuries this year, because they've got Rome Odunze, and because they've got other pieces in the receiving corps, there is something there where the right combination of head coach comes in and they can make that work. It terrifies me that they kept hold of Ryan Poles and that they're still good. He's going to be allowed to see a third head coach. That very, very rarely works in the NFL. And there's just a part of me that, watching what Drake May managed to do, knowing that of the 3 key positions in the NFL, the 3 positions that are the hardest to get right through the draft, pass rusher, quarterback and corner, they've got 2 of those sorted. Drake May, I think, is a superstar. What we saw from him in the second half of this season, there's part of me that if I was redrafting this draft would consider taking him over Jaden Daniels.
Wow.
I'm that high on him.
Wow.
Christian Gonzalez, for me, outside of Pat Surtain, I think he was the best corner in the NFL this year, in a terrible football team. They have building blocks. They have an owner who you know will give you time if you give him a little summit. I really think if I'm Ben Johnson, if I'm Liam Cohen, if I'm one of these hot young head coaches who are supposedly nailed on for the Bears job, I'm looking at that Patriots job and thinking, actually, Foxborough might be the spot for me.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on that one. I'm taking that Bears job. Caleb Williams, to me, has enough in him that we saw last year that he can be special. I'm on record. I'm not the world's biggest Caleb Williams fan right now. And he's also a powder. He can be a loser. And I feel like he needs to be more solid. Caleb Williams needs to, in the new year, find that middle. Don't be so high and so low, which we all need lessons about that in life. But the Bears job for me, you have enough pieces. The Patriots, I don't believe in the Patriots franchise right now. I personally don't think they have enough pieces. I think Drake May is the third or fourth best quarterback in that draft. If I have to choose between the Bears or Patriots job, I'm taking the Bears job. And I don't know that many head coaches are going to flock to New England because I feel like Bill Belichick left that organization in a bit of, they're in a mess. They're in a weird period. I think we're going to look back in 10 years, and it took a lot of time for the Patriots to move on from Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. And that's usually what happens historically. You have this dominant era with a head coach and you win Super Bowls and with a quarterback, and it takes you a while to find that new era. We've seen that with New Orleans. I'm taking the Bears job over the Pats job.
It's fascinating. Obviously, the Pats have the better pick in the draft. They're right at the top end. And it's a draft that's full of pass rush talent. Yeah. And that's where they can really improve very quickly. I there's enough, I just feel like there's enough there. There's just, I don't think any of these jobs are great, though. None of these are screaming out to me.
That's what I was thinking. There's none of these jobs, and there's none of the candidates for the jobs. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the next answer. I find it very weird, and this could change in a couple of days. That's how it goes in the NFL. That Mike Vrabel, who was Coach of the Year, material Coach of the Year type of guy in Tennessee, did a really great job with that organization that kind of fell off. Mike Vrabel, to me, to the Patriots, just seemed like a lock. I know we mentioned the Raiders earlier, but that hasn't materialized. I would just think Mike Vrabel played there, won Super Bowls with Robert Kraft. Mike Vrabel loves cold weather football. He loves a running game. He loves defense. That is a New England Patriots coach, and he's not really being associated with that job as we speak right now. I think that says something about the job.
You might be talking me into Vrabel for the Bears, though, because actually, he needs to get a good young offensive
Bears
line.
fans want Vrabel. I know that for a fact, yeah.
Caleb Williams' biggest issue is just holding on to the ball too long, and he's trying to do too much.
He's trying to be USC Caleb Williams. You can't do that in the NFL.
He is trying to prove to everyone that he is everything to every man, and that he is a quarterback who can do it all. He can be Peyton Manning, but he can also be Lamar Jackson. Yeah. And he's not either of those guys. He's somewhere in the middle.
Point. I agree with you. Yeah.
So he needs somebody who's going to work with him, but actually a culture guy, somebody who's going to come in and manifest the right environment.
They need a head coach who's stronger than their general manager, right? Because I don't believe in polls. Bears fans do not believe in polls as a GM. You need a head coach with some power. A lot of it's power, Will. I've covered this up before. A lot of it is who has the power in the building. That's the problem with the Jacksonville job. The Jaguars job, you're the head coach. You know who has the power. The kind of owner and a GM who's the cockroach of the NFL who keeps sticking around. Nobody really wants that Jaguars job. It often comes down to roles and power and how it's divided in the building.
It's interesting because I also think with the Bears job, the big name, and we keep saying, is Ben Johnson, right?
Yeah.
And what he's done with Detroit and what he's done with Jared Goff has been nothing short of sensational. With a lot of talent there, really good offensive line, really good receivers, everything else. Jameer Gibbs, how many people laughed at that pick, and now he's ended up being...
He's the new Barry Sanders of the NFL. It's
absolutely
incredible.
Unbelievable. Breaking franchise records, just brilliant. Now he's the bell cow, just love him to pieces. I think the problem with a Ben Johnson type, and I actually kind of think the same about Liam Cohen, although I've got another thought about that I'm going to come to in a moment, is that these geniuses, we're never sure what they're going to be like as a head coach. Talks about the culture thing.
Jonathan Gannon with Arizona, right? Yeah, it works out for Sean McVay, but he's even had issues that couple of years. But to be the head coach, the right head coach, and you're going to last. It can't be, you're good for 1 year and then you're gone in 2 or 3. It's got to be culture. It's got to be discipline. He's
been around Dan Campbell for the last 3 years.
And that's but sometimes the offensive geniuses are kind of like the NFL nerds on Twitter, and it's like they're really good on paper, but you put them in the spotlight and they're like, Jonathan Gannon or whatever with the wild eyes.
You want him to be Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, someone who can be a leader of men and also do the
100%.
offensive genius
What
stuff.
is the best?
And we don't know if he's that yet.
If Ben Johnson takes a job, what's the best job for Ben Johnson that's out there right now?
I think it's probably still the Bears because they've got enough that he can hit the ground. Although you've got to go into the NFC North and play against the Vikings, the Packers, and your Lions team.
If I'm Ben Johnson, I say screw it, and I say Shad Khan, I'm taking the Jaguars job. But Balky's out. Make a power play. He can take whatever job he wants. Everybody wants him. Say, I will take that job. But everyone knows that Trent Baalke should be gone, and that's how I become the Jaguars head coach.
I'm going to give you my very quick Liam Cohen thought, because I actually think as a play caller, he's impressed me more than Ben Johnson this year. I think what the Buccaneers have achieved on offense has been nothing short of miraculous. Barring reaching the NFC Championship game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers should move on from their head coach.
From Todd Bowles.
Todd Bowles. Lovely man. The defense isn't working.
You have my full support on that.
And they should promote Liam Cohen internally.
I'm not a big Todd Bowles believer. Watch him end up in the NFC Championship. But as a head coach, post Bruce Arians and Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, I'm not the world's biggest Todd Bowles fan.
So I think Liam Cohen, head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next year.
That's a very happy New Year type of idea. I like it.
Brilliant. Brian, brilliant stuff from you.
I loved it. It was a fun one, Will.
As always, keep checking out the stuff at talkSPORT End Zone on the channel. We've got exclusive interviews coming up this week with a number of the playoff teams starting tonight with Damian Pierce of the Houston Texans, so check that one out. Should already be up on the channel. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, do all the good stuff. This has been The Rundown.